And I'm glad to be here. I haven't been to Indianapolis in about 30 years. Last time I was here, I went to the Children's Museum and I looked up in the web to see what it looks like today. It looks a little different than when I remember it. But it was very nice then. I'm a rail nut. I'm the Cato Institute's official rail nut. I was told to go to the Children's Museum to go see their model and toy train collection, which was very interesting. I model at 12 inches to the foot scale. I helped restore this steam locomotive, which is the second most powerful operating steam locomotive in the world. I once owned 5 railroad passenger cars that we were going to restore to run behind the locomotive. So I really love trains, but I'm not so fond of subsidies to trains, especially when some people end up paying the subsidies and other people ride them. When I look at the plan for Indy Connect, when I look at the plan for the green rapid transit line that could be a light rail line, I have to ask, what are the benefits, what are the costs, who's going to get those benefits, and who's going to pay the costs? Now, when I look at Indy Connect, which doesn't necessarily refer much to rail, it does make an interesting point, and that is that Indianapolis has one of the smallest transit systems for an urban area of its size in the country. Just compare it with other urban areas in the Midwest. It's the only one that's smaller is Omaha. All others are larger. They're larger both in terms of the amount of money that's spent per capita on transit and the amount of rides that transit carries per capita each year. Milwaukee's is about 3 times as big in terms of money, and they carry almost 5 times as many people per capita as Indianapolis's. But the question you have to ask is, do you really want to or need to put a lot more money into the system? If you do put more money into the system, you'll probably get more transit ridership. If we compare transit ridership with costs on a per capita basis for transit systems in the 60 major urban areas across the country, we see that more money equals more transit ridership. It's almost a straight line relationship, going from McAllen, Texas, which spends about $6 per capita to get 1 transit ride per capita per year, all the way up to New York, which spends $650 per capita to get about 250 transit rides per capita per year. In other words, everybody in the city rides it almost once a year, or in the urban area. Indianapolis is somewhere in this lower bunch, $41 per year spent per capita to get 7 transit rides per year. So although there does seem to be a roughly straight line relationship, there are some that are off the line, like Seattle here spends an average of $6.50 per transit ride. That compares to less than $3 per transit ride here in Indianapolis. If you want to get bigger, you want to go in the direction of Honolulu, which only spends $2.75 a transit ride, but gets a lot more transit rides. On a per capita basis, Honolulu is about the 6th or 7th largest, most effective transit system in America. Now, it used to be that transit advocates would argue for more spending on transit on the basis that some people are too poor to have cars, and so we need to provide transit for these people. But since then, what's happened is almost everybody has gotten a car. Cars are cheap. Frankly, even though gas prices look high, gas is cheap, fuel is cheap, driving is cheap. So right now, according to the Census Bureau, all but about 4.5% of American workers have a car in their household that they can use to get to work. In Indianapolis, it's all but 2.9% have a car in their household that they can use to get to work. There's almost nobody in Indianapolis who's a worker, who has a job, who doesn't have a car available. Now, where does that 4.5%, how do they get to work, or the 2.9% in Indianapolis? About 40% of them take transit. Interestingly, about 20% of them drive alone to work. Now, there's no cars in their households. How do they drive alone to work? Well, I asked Alan Pisarski, who's the nation's expert on commuting. He said they borrow a car. So even people who don't have a car in their household, 20% of them drive to work alone. Another 12% carpool. Carpooling you can see, but 20% driving alone to work. So what it comes down to is 2.9% of workers in Indianapolis don't have a car in their household. 40% of them take transit to work. So that's about 1.2%. And guess what? Indianapolis's share, transit's share of Indianapolis commuting is about 1.2%. So in other words, Indigo is pretty much taking everybody who doesn't have a car to work who wants to take transit to work. 1.2% is low, admittedly, but it's doing that job of getting people to work who don't have a car because they can't afford one. But since then, transit advocates have invented a new job for transit. Why? Well, because the old job was going away. Everybody has a car. So in order to justify transit's existence, in order to justify the existence of all these subsidies we put into transit, they've invented a new job. And that job was described in the Indy Connect documents in this one sentence. It says, we need a robust transit system to help our city, help our urban area grow, to attract new jobs and talent, and to deal with congestion and air pollution. If we look at this, break this down, essentially what they're saying is the job of transit is not to help people move around who don't have a car. The job of transit is to attract wealthy people out of their cars. It's not to help poor people who don't have a car, it's to get wealthy people out of their cars. Let's look at the first reason here. Promote economic growth. Okay, when I read this, not having been to Indianapolis lately, I said, well, Indianapolis is one of those Rust Belt cities. It must have a stagnant population growth, stagnant job growth. You know, it's just not doing very well. And they're thinking if they have a good transit system, they'll be able to beef up the growth. So then I looked up the census data. It turns out Indianapolis is the fastest growing metropolitan area in the Midwest, by far. The only one that comes close is Columbus, and they don't have a big transit system either. You go to Minneapolis, which likes to think they're the heart of the Midwest, and they're the fast-growing region of the Midwest, and they've invested a lot in transit. They're only growing about a third as fast as Indianapolis. You look at cities across the country that have invested heavily in transit lately, like Portland and Denver and San Francisco and Salt Lake City. They're all growing a lot slower than Indianapolis. The only ones that are growing faster are the ones that are in the Sun Belt, like Houston and Dallas. Some of them have invested in transit, but that hasn't really made a difference. Their Sun Belt is just growing. Across the country, you look at the largest urban areas and compare transit spending with transit ridership with population growth, and it turns out there's a weak correlation. You don't see it very well on this graph, but there is a weak correlation that says if you get more transit ridership, that does have an effect on growth. What's the effect? It's negative. More transit ridership means less growth. If you're into statistics, the correlation coefficient is negative 0.27, which means 0.27% of your growth is related to how little you spend on transit. The more you spend, the less growth you'll get. All right, so that is not a justification for transit, or for spending more money on transit. Now, how about competing for jobs and talent? What do they mean by that? Well, there's this myth that they repeat on the next page of this particular document, that young, well-educated people want to live near downtowns, where there's lots of transit, where there's lots of walking, lots of cycling opportunities, lively downtowns. And so we have to provide that, and we have to have lots of transit in order to attract these young well-educated people. But this number here says young, well-educated people are 94% more likely to live close in. 94%, that's a big number, right? But what does it really mean? Well, if you read the document carefully, they're saying by close in, they're talking about the 5% of people who live closest to downtown. You do the math, that 5%, only 31% of young people have a college degree. That means instead of 5% of people with a college degree living close to downtown, it's 7.5% of people with a college degree living close to downtown. So they're talking about spending $1.3 billion on transit capital improvements, plus $125 million a year more on operating costs for the benefit of 2.5% or less of young, well-educated people who want to live near downtown. Now, are there any other reasons other than transit why young, well-educated people might be more likely to live near downtown than young, less well-educated people? Well, first of all, housing near downtown is more expensive. Land is more expensive. So to be able to live there, you have to have higher incomes, and guess what? If you're better educated, you're more likely to have a higher income. Also, jobs downtown tend to be in finance, insurance, and real estate, and for those kind of jobs, you need to have better educations. So better educated people are more likely to work downtown. So it's not that they necessarily want to have transit, it's just that they happen to want to live near their jobs. Really what it comes down to is, what they're saying is, we want to spend all these subsidies to subsidize well-educated, high-income people. Is that really the goal of transit? It's no longer to help low-income people, it's to help high-income people. And then I notice there's a big contradiction here. They're saying, we want to attract people who want to live close in. So how are we going to do that? We're going to have a regional transit system that covers not just Marion County, but all the counties around it. Well, really, what they're saying is, what they want to do is extend their tax base to all the counties around Marion County, so they can collect all that much more money, so they can expand their transit system. And I noticed many of the counties got one little transit line lapping over into the county, one town, but they're wanting to tax the whole county for that.